All right. The Hangout is now live on air. Excellent. So here we are. Welcome everybody to another Eduro Learning webinar. Appreciate you all joining us here, whether this be live or recorded, as we talk about connecting your classroom and the power of micro-credentials as a professional development. And so we're going to be taking about 45 minutes or so, maybe up to an hour. We'll see how the conversation goes here. I'm talking about this idea of why it's important to connect your classroom, some of the things we offer at Eduro Learning, and the exciting new things that we have coming around micro-credentials. We've got a great panel today, and so I want to have them introduce themselves to you. So we're going to start from my left to right on my screen. Chrissy Hellier, will you please introduce yourself for us, please?
Hi there, everybody. My name is Chrissy Hellier, and I currently live in Perth, Australia. But for the purposes of today, I am actually in Seattle. So I'm primarily an elementary school teacher, but I really love helping teachers do lots of really cool stuff in their classroom with technology and impacting student learning using technology.
And Chrissy's here in Seattle visiting me, and she's actually in the room underneath me. So if she says something really bad, I can just stomp on the floor and get her attention. So thanks for being here, Chrissy. Appreciate you flying all the way to do some work here as well. Next up is Dianna, who has woken up early to be with us today. We really appreciate it. Dianna, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dianna Beabout. I'm checking in today from Doha, Qatar. I am been in teaching, mentoring, coaching for many years, and I got involved with Eduro with their coaching courses. And it's something that's a passion of mine, working and supporting teachers in the classroom so they can do all the amazing stuff that they can do.
Awesome. Thank you. And it's 4 a.m. in Doha, so we appreciate you waking up to be here with us as well. Next is Kim, who is in Bangkok. Kim?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim, and I am in Bangkok. I have been in kind of the technology area in education, particularly technology coaching, for the last 17 years. Like Dianna, I'm really passionate about helping teachers feel confident and successful in using technology in their classroom and kind of taking them from where they are to where they want to go. So I'm super excited to talk about coaching and kind of what that role looks like and how you can make a shift from being a classroom teacher to being a coach, or how you can kind of level up your coaching to be a coaching rock star like Dianna.
Cool. Awesome. And then last on our panel today is Lissa. And Lissa wasn't going to get up at 4 a.m., but she's on the same time zone as Dianna and felt peer pressure. So, so we're lucky enough. I appreciate the positive peer pressure that we can have on each other. Lissa, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Lissa, and I am in Kuwait. And I'm currently an instructional coach, specifically for technology integration, but we've really kind of embraced the instructional coaching ethos at our school. But before that, I was in the French classroom, and that's really what got me excited and just passionate about connecting my classroom so that my students in South Carolina could have some relevance to learning French. Awesome. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff Udick, and I'm here in Seattle, Washington as well, where Chrissy is here visiting as we're doing some work with some school districts here in the state of Washington back in the United States. So our first question this evening as we get started, or this morning, or wherever we are, it's just this idea of connected classrooms. You know, that's really what this webinar is focused on. It's really what we focus on, is kind of the future of education. Is the first step is you've got to be connected. And I think what a better way to demonstrate this than even through this webinar where we're across, you know, around the world. The hardest thing to overcome is time zones, but you can do that. And so I wonder if we just get started with this idea of, as classroom teachers and even as coaches, why should you, let's start with the teacher at first. Why is it so important for, in today's world, a teacher to be connected to other educators around the world? I would like to take that.
I'll go.
All right.
So one of the reasons why I think being connected yourself and also connecting your class is, for me, it started out just being a way of providing a window into the classroom for my parents. And then I discovered very, very quickly that if I could create a window for parents, then I could actually create a window for anyone. And I know that can be a little bit scary, sound a little bit like, why would anyone want to look in the classroom? But there's people, or there's educators around the world and other students around the world that are really keen to learn and be able to connect with others around the world. And so what a powerful thing, just simply by doing a Google Hangout or using any other tool to bring people inside your classroom without them having to physically come and visit you. So that's the power for me.
Cool. Kim, did you have something to add?
I was going to say that I think we all probably have a variety of different reasons. And Jeff, your question was kind of leaning me towards why, as a teacher, I should be connected. Chrissy talked a lot about why you should connect in your classroom. And for being a teacher, for most of my teaching career, I was teaching middle school technology or being a middle school technology coach. That's like my area of interest / passion. And in most schools, there's only one, right? There's one middle school technology teacher, or there's one middle school French teacher, or there's one middle school whatever teacher, and you're totally isolated. Like, sure, you've got your elementary colleagues, sure, you've got your high school colleagues. Yes, there are other middle school teachers with you, but very rarely does someone teach exactly the same thing that you teach and really want to know and learn exactly the same things you want to. So that's where I found the power in being connected, is I could build my own personal learning network of other middle school technology teachers who wanted to learn the same kinds of things as me at the same time as me, and I could benefit from kind of sharing my learning and learning from them at the same time, instead of feeling like all I ever got for PD was the one conference my school would send me on a year. Now I had PD all the time whenever I needed it.
Yeah. Lissa, will you talk a little bit about, you live in Kuwait, which isn't a very big country. And I'm sure, as far as just educators, there's a couple international schools there, and so even just like your local network is probably pretty isolated. What are some tools or just some tips maybe you have about becoming a connected educator? What do you find yourself kind of being drawn to every day?
Yeah, because isolated was exactly the word I was thinking of. Like, when we moved here, the coaching position was brand new, and I was kind of like, I'm not sure what to do. So for me, I was already on Twitter when we came abroad, and so that was my go-to. And switching my PLN because when I was in the US, I had started building my PLN of French teachers and more of like US centric. And so when I came abroad, just trying to find that new network, and Coattail was what really did that for me. So I just keep it's kind of part of my daily workflow is Twitter now. And I have my Hootsuite up and I have my Twitter up, and they're my little my pinned on tabs on my browser. And that's just kind of where I go, and participating in chats, both like around coaching, around technology. That's been really powerful, because absolutely, lots of times I feel quite isolated. And so all of you I've met via Twitter originally.
Yeah, that is so true, right? It's so fascinating that we all literally met via networks before we actually met in person. And I love what you said there, because I think there's some of the viewers that are watching this webinar are probably like, she just said the words pin, Hootsuite, tweet, retweet, Coattail, and I have absolutely no idea what any of those mean. And if you're that educator, that's really what these are for, right? These micro credentials that we are creating at Edura Learning. If you're hearing those kind of acronyms and you're like, I have no idea what Lissa just said, this is what these micro credentials are for, is to help you and support you in growing that network, right? Dianna, if you think about this, I know, we met on Twitter before we met at, I think Learning 2 is the first time we actually met face-to-face. Right. And it's so crazy because, we meet on the network and then we meet in person and give each other big hugs. And it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've known you forever. And it's the first time I've met you. Can you kind of talk to that idea of and I don't even know if there's an answer to this, that idea of building relationships over Twitter. I know it's really weird for people that don't get it or haven't done it to really understand it. And for you, how has that been, and how have you grown your network?
Right. So it's kind of amazing that you can build these relationships with 140 character messages back and forth. I think it's just, you're out there. And so that's part of it, that you've put yourself out there to make these connections. And so, and then you exchange information and people help you. And there's an emotional part to that. Like, I'm being supported, like Lissa talked about, being new or in a new area, or feeling isolated, or the only person in your school with that job. And so it's that, like, oh my gosh, I have these people to help me out. And you build this relationship and connection with them that way. This is my year 2 in Doha. I was in China at an international school for 5 years. And so even before I moved here, I was on Twitter connecting with people, people that I worked with. With Lissa, like, who's in the Middle East that I can connect with, and kind of rebuilding my PLN. And so even before I got here, and so there's that. And then I see people, I meet them in person, and there's always that, like, I know you from Twitter. And it's just that, I think you're passionate educators, you want to connect. And so you find that commonality in that way.
Yeah, very
cool.
I
just want to jump in on another thought. Like, we're talking all about these personal connections and moving around and seeing how we can build that, like, personal learning for ourselves as we go. And there's one other element that we really haven't specifically talked about that Chrissy touched on that I think is really relevant, is the idea of inviting in experts and, like, connecting with experts and connecting with people who normally would be out of your reach. And Dianna triggered that for me when she talked about building her network in Doha when she was still in China. That's a perfect example. Normally you wouldn't be connecting with people in Doha when you live in China, but it's the same thing with experts or authors or journalists or scientists or astronauts. Like, you can bring all of those real world experts into your classroom by being connected in these learning spaces. And I think that is incredibly powerful, even if you're not going to be traveling from country to country and need to build this kind of, now I'm isolated kind of network of people around me. You can connect your students to experts in the field using these tools, and that makes learning real.
And I think that's a really good segue into this idea that, one of the things our micro-credentials really do is help you become connected as a teacher so that you can connect your students. It's very difficult if you, a teacher yourself, aren't connected to be like, oh, I really wish my kids would, be able to talk to an author. That can happen, but you need to understand as a teacher, as an educator, how do these connections work? How can I be connected to foster those relationships for my students? So let's go through and think of, like, what is the one, if you can think of just one quick story, and I'm talking like quick story, like 1 minute story of how your connection fostered your personal connections on the network, fostered something amazing in the classroom for your kids. So give it a second to think about that.
I've got one.
All right, Chrissy, you go first.
So my 3rd graders were studying rocks and minerals in Bangkok, Thailand. And we didn't have access to anyone who was an expert in actually telling us more about rocks and minerals. So we had our books and we had the internet, and it just so happened that one of my parents, his father was a retired geologist. So he was back in the United States, and we were able to Skype him in. He stayed up very late to come and talk with us. We were able to invite another class in, so he spoke to 2 classes. And I can't tell you, I can't even explain the awe and the fascination that the 3rd graders had listening to this gentleman share. Like, he had this rock that came out of the gut of a dinosaur, and he had his tools, and he was showing us all the different tools, and they were talking about that for days. And that is just not an opportunity that had presented itself to us before, and it wouldn't have been made possible without, even though that was a face-to-face connection, it was through the tools that allow us to connect to others and virtually bring them into the classroom that made that so successful.
Very cool. Dianna, how about you?
I was thinking it wasn't particularly, being a coach, I'm more sometimes on the sidelines when these things are happening, but one story I was thinking of is the mystery Skypes. And we had a teacher, she connected, she wanted to do a mystery Skype, so she connected with other teachers through Twitter, and then we set those up. And then it's basically like a Google Hangout or using Skype, and the kids had to figure out where each other were. Like, the teachers knew, but the kids didn't, the students didn't know. And so there was preparation on both sides, and it's basically like 20 questions, and the students ask each other questions and try to narrow down where they are in the world. And just the excitement of the kids and trying to figure it out. It was kind of competitive, and yeah, it just the learning that happened was really great. Not something you just like do like a little game in your class with that, but they were actually interacting with kids in a different part of the world.
Very cool. And can you go ahead, as we're going to move on to Kim, do you want to drop the link to the mystery Skype? I know it's got a website there into our chat for people.
Okay, can somebody drop that in?
Yes, I can do that.
Sorry,
I'll do that for you.
All right, Kim, how about you? What story do you have about?
So like Diana, I've had a lot of stories from being a coach, but the one that came to my mind when you were talking is one from Madeline Cox when I was at Yokohama International School in Japan, and her students were reading editorials and articles from an author who happened to be living in Japan, which is part of the reason why they were reading these articles, and he was like a real hero for the students. And they wrote to him on Twitter, connected with him on Twitter, and then he Skyped into the class a number of times to help them with their IB language writing skills. That's like super relevant, super on task, and super inspirational for the kids. And she ends up with quite a series of really nice series of blog posts about that I will put in the chat too. So you can see how this looks at the elementary level and the higher level of high school.
Very cool. Lissa, how about you?
Yeah, it's hard because as a coach,
right?
but like as a coach, I've gotten to see so many, but every time somebody asks me this question, I still go back to when I was in South Carolina, because that was kind of my defining moment to really help me figure out why I'm even doing this. Because my students probably were never leaving the city, really likely never leaving the state, let alone the country, and I'm trying to teach French to them. And so I was so thankful to connect with a French teacher. Well, in France, he was teaching English to his students. I was teaching French to mine. The time difference was too much, so we would just have our students tweet back and forth, and that led to more like French classes that would do that with us. And so we would tweet to them in French, they would tweet to us in English. And I just still have pictures, like I have pictures of my students like on their little iPod touches tweeting to these kids in France. And it like still gives me chills, and like, I just get so excited because it made it so relevant for them. And they were so excited to actually learn French, which I never maybe would have thought high school students in South Carolina would be.
That's cool. That's very cool. And just as we start thinking about this, if you have any questions, as you're watching this webinar, there's a live chat over on just to the right of the video. Feel free to ask us questions and we'll get them in. So these kind of questions, and if there's something in here in this conversation that we're just having now with Chrissy, Diana, Kim, and Lissa, that kind of spark your interest and you're like, yes, that's where I want my kids to be. I know that's the next step for me. This is the Connected Teacher micro-credential. And we'll be talking more about what the micro-credential entails as we go through this. But just keep that in the back of your line that we're talking about, that idea of connecting ourselves as teachers to connect our students as well. We're going to move now on to a topic of one-to-one devices, or the idea of every child having some type of connected device. And our first question around this is kind of like, I love this question, what changes in a one-to-one classroom? And the first thing that I think of is like, what doesn't change? Like once you give every kid a device, and as a teacher, you're now looking at 30 kids, 24 kids, however many kids you have, and you're looking at the back of screens. There's a lot of things I think you have to think about when teaching and learning changing, when every kid is actually connected on the internet. And so as we start thinking about this idea of the one-to-one classroom where every child has a device, what is something that you think is a must-have in a one-to-one classroom? Let's start with that. If you think of like, if there's one thing I tell a teacher, if you're going to have devices and every kid on a device, what's like your one tip that you give teachers? And I think for me, I'll start. I think my one tip is you have to walk around the classroom. You can't sit at the front of the classroom at your desk and expect kids to be on task. Like you've just given them the most distracting device ever created by mankind, and you have 30 backs of screens looking at you. You're never going to see what's going on. So my first advice to teachers is like, you've got to get up and move. And we're going to go backwards this time. So I'm going to start with Lissa and go back across the channel that way. So Lissa, what's like your advice for teachers to find themselves in a one-to-one classroom?
For me, it's that while my goal is for those to, like, the devices to be invisible and just become part of our classroom, you have to acknowledge them, and it does change the procedures that you might have in your classroom. It might change some of the rules you might have in your classroom, and you do really have to teach your students what it is like to be, for lack of a better word, a citizen in your classroom with devices. It can't just go on as normal. You've got to figure out how that might change and be really open and clear with the students about how that has changed your classroom.
Ooh, I love that. Kim, how about you?
I don't want to follow that. That was really good. Mine is like a typical type A thing. I feel like you have to have a central space online where you put all of your class resources that kids and parents can access. One place. It doesn't matter what that one place is. When I was a classroom teacher, it was always a class blog because that's what I liked. Google Classroom, Google website. It doesn't matter what it is, but one place where everything is. So when kids are working, they know where to go to find the next thing they need to work on. I
love that. Great advice. Dianna, how about you?
I think kind of follow up on both of those is also having a workflow, some kind of workflow, some kind of those procedures. Like with the, a simple one I would use with the students was having a signal for when the iPads can be up or when the iPad should be down or whatever device, tablet you're using. We had a signal for that, and we would practice it. Sometimes you have to practice it multiple times, but just that, but just getting into those routines and that about using the devices and, this is device time, this is not device time, and that. So I think having those procedures and those workflows, and like, Lissa brought up, it's going to change things, and you have to be ready for that.
Awesome. And Chrissy, how about you?
I think the number one tip for me is that use the kids in your classroom that are already quite comfortable and quite confident with the tools. Like, have those tech experts. And even if you don't have tech experts, you're the classroom teacher. You can identify those kids that you can always take aside. You can teach them something very quickly, and then they become an extension of you when it comes time for the technology to be in full use in your classroom. And then you're not the savior that's running around like a chook with no head trying to solve everyone's problems. You've got 4 or 5 kids in your class that can help others when they get stuck. So that would be my tip.
I love that. I mean, those are all such great tips. And this is the thing, like, there are so many things I think that you have to reconsider once you've gone one-to-one. And, if this is your first year going one-to-one, if you are working in a district that, maybe it's just passed a levy or it's just, rolled out a plan to go one-to-one in the future, or even if, you've been one-to-one for a while, I think there are some great tips in there about things that we just have to constantly consider and to think about. As you think about the one-to-one classroom, and when you walk into a one-to-one classroom, how does learning look different to you? When you walk into a classroom and you see every kid on a device, and where this comes to me is I remember when we went one-to-one, when I was working at the International School of Bangkok, I remember going around with an administrator, and we walked into a room and all the kids were on devices. And he was like, oh my gosh, that is so great to see all these kids on devices. And I had to pause for a second and think like, okay, that is great. Don't get me wrong. But to me, it was like more of what they're doing and what is on the screen and what are they actually actively involved in. When you do that, when you're walking around or when you're a teacher, what are you keeping in the back of your mind about how learning looks differently when you are in a classroom? And I'm going to start from the middle and go out this time. So Kim, you're going to be up first because you were shaking your head the most.
Okay. So what I was thinking about is like, does it look different or does it really look the same? And kind of what I was thinking about there is if you're running a student-centered, inquiry-driven classroom where kids are developing creative products that demonstrate their understanding, actually the classroom can look very similar because kids are working at their own pace, on their own task, proceeding along to a clear and commonly understood outcome that they're working towards with, criteria listed. Like, I don't think there's a sense that, okay, it looks different because they're holding different things in their hands, but what they're doing is still the same. It's still students learning at their own pace, trying to demonstrate their understanding in new and unique ways in an engaging environment. So I guess I actually look for the similarities rather than the differences. I don't want to see every kid in the room doing the same thing at the same time. That's what I don't want to see. I
like that. Dianna, how about you?
Well, Kim brings up the point. I think we're just infused with all this technology, but it's the learning that should take the lead. And so for me, it's really when I walk into the classroom and the students are using devices, what are they using it? How are they using it to enhance or support what they're trying to learn or accomplish or to create? And so that's what I want to know when I walk in the classroom is what's the goal? What's the goal of the teacher, of the students? And then how might these devices and this technology support that?
I like that. Lissa, how about you?
Last semester, so like in the spring, I took over grade 10 science class for the last 3-4 months of the school year. And I was thinking about if somebody had walked into my classroom, and there were a lot of days that somebody might walk in and be like, oh, well, technology isn't actually helping learning right now, because at some points we did have to do a little bit more lecture style learning experiences. But my students all had access to my entire slide deck. And it took me until this year to be able to verbalize what that actually did for my students, because when I was walking around the classroom, because I needed to make sure they were on task on their screens, they were actually able to go through the slides at their own pace. And that created some differentiation that I didn't even wasn't able to verbalize at the time, but reflecting back on it, my students, I could be talking about something and maybe they needed to go back a slide or two to like review that part of it. Or maybe they were totally done with this and they got it and they can move on to that next slide or two. So I think it's really important when somebody comes into the classroom and is observing to ask about what's going on and why you're doing what you're doing before making some assumptions, because somebody could have come in and just been like, why are they all on their devices? This is just wasted screen time. When in reality, it was creating that differentiated learning for them that they wouldn't have been able to have without those devices there.
I like that. And I agree. I think one of the things I love about technology the most is the ability to differentiate. I don't think there's been a device that allows a teacher to differentiate in so many ways than a connected device does in the hands of kids, for sure. I mean, that to me has always been something I've been very passionate about as well. Chrissy, how about you?
Oh, thanks. Make me go last and everybody said all the good stuff. Okay. Thank you, Lissa, for the prompt, because I immediately was thinking, okay, so if I think back to when I was in the classroom, what would you see if you walked into my classroom? And I was always known as the kind of, you're the techie teacher because you've got all this stuff and it's all going on in your classroom. And then I think, if you walked into my classroom at any given time, it's highly likely that you wouldn't see us using technology, because I truly, passionately believe that it's about choosing the right tool for the job. And so if the right tool for the job happened to be a pencil and paper, then that's what we would be using. So then that kind of made me think about, well, you would be seeing levels of SEMA, and so in the use of technology inside the classroom. And so you probably wouldn't see much of the S and the A, because we would be using better tools. But when it came to be doing the M and the R of the learning, we couldn't do that learning without the tools, because it's the technology tools that help us to transform the learning. So I hope that if you ever did walk into my classroom, you would see us using the right tool for the job. And the kids would be able to say, why am I using this tool? Like, why am I doing this? So they would know the purpose and the reason why.
I love that. You bring up such a great point that when we talk about, connected classrooms and we talk about, one-to-one devices or one-to-one classrooms, that a lot of times we think that means we always have to be on the device. And I think that's a really good point, that it's another tool, but it's the right tool that can extend learning beyond things that we've ever thought possible in the classroom. So I just, you know, if any of this conversation kind of feels like you're like, that's where I'm at, that's what I need. This is the micro credential that we're offering. And we'll talk more about those at the end, but this is the one-to-one teacher micro credential. And I think it's great that, you know, everybody here in the talk has worked in one-to-one, you know, in the webinar has worked in one-to-one classrooms. And as we're going to change gears here and talk about the last micro credential that we're launching this round is the coach. And I think that also speaks to why we have everyone here in this webinar as well, is not only has everyone here, you know, Chrissy and Dianna and Kim and Lissa taught in, you know, heavily deviced classrooms, but they're also all coaches in supporting teachers in this new networked world. And so as we talk about the coach micro credential, some of the questions that come to mind is like, one of the things we find, and I think I just ran into a coach the other day that just comes to my mind, is that people who start, you know, people who usually get put in that technology coaching role. And I think, Chrissy, it was you that were like, you know, I was the techie teacher. And that's usually how you start. You know, it's like the techie teacher, you know, hey, we are making a new position. And guess what? You're that new position. And there's very little training around what that new position means. And so, Kim, I want to start with you on this because you and Dianna are actually are going to be the mentors for this micro credential. And so when we talk about some of those ideas about making the transition, what are some things as you've helped others become coaches that you find are like kind of the sticking points or the points that people seem to struggle with the most?
I think the hardest part is being the techie teacher in your classroom with your students is very different than the skill set needed to help other teachers do that. So I think the challenging part of the transition is, how do you communicate the strategies and skills and techniques and approaches that worked really well for you as an individual in your classroom with another teacher who's a completely different individual and teaches completely different from you and has different goals and perspectives. So like, how do you basically make that transition from teaching students to teaching adults? Because it is different. And just because you're great at teaching students doesn't mean those exact same skills transfer over to teaching adults. So to me, that's the first hurdle.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Dianna, how about you? What is like that hurdle that you see?
I think kind of segueing off what Kim's saying is, if you're that, whether it's technology or literacy that you're really passionate about in your classroom, and then you are given this great opportunity to work with other teachers, is again, it's the way that you do things is not particularly going to work with other teachers. So it's really taking a step back and realizing it's about supporting and guiding and listening, a lot of listening with the teachers and helping them find their way to meet their goals, which will often not be exactly the way you might do that. So it's really, it's a switch in, and like you said, I don't know if a lot of teachers are always prepared for that. They excel in the classroom, and then administration sees that and they want to pull them out to help other people. You do have to, there's a mindset switch for me. There's how you interact with the teachers and using your expertise, but then also not being the expert. You're not always the expert on something, and that's okay as well. It's about working with the teacher to get to their goals.
Yeah. And I think for me, one of the hardest things is like, and I remember every school I was a coach at, one of the hardest things was like, people almost like, you go into a classroom and people think you're an administrator there to evaluate them. You know, like all of a sudden it's like, I'm not an administrator. And as a coach, you kind of are in that kind of like weird, I'm not an administrator, I'm a support person. And teachers sometimes, even your colleagues who, you know, you were good friends with, are like, you're in this kind of weird area that is weird for you to figure out. It's weird for your colleagues to figure out. And it's just, it can get kind of awkward at times. I remember having a lot of conversations with teachers of like, I'm not here to evaluate. I'm not going to judge on what you're doing. I'm here to help and support and move you forward. And so for me, that's always the thing, is how do you help build that idea with the teachers that you're supporting of like, I'm here to support you. I'm not going to I'm not running to the principal to say they're not using technology or they're using technology the wrong way. That's not my job. So for me, that's always like, how do you help build those relationships for teachers to see you as that support role? Chrissy, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the relationships. In that coaching role, I spent probably the majority of my time building relationships, and showing that, like Dianna said, that I can listen, and that I didn't always have to have the answers, and that it was more about working together to move the learning forward, whether that be the learning of your students or the learning of the actual teacher who has either asked for or is wanting support. So yeah, for me, it's relationships.
I like that. How about you, Lissa?
I think for me, really shifting from maybe like telling someone what to do to figuring out the best question to ask so that they can come to their own conclusions, and kind of helping them realize that they already have everything that they need inside of them. I'm just here to kind of facilitate for them so that they can actually make it known. Like, just like with my differentiation, I needed a conversation with somebody to make that realization in the open. And so I just kind of have been a long time, but like that journey of shifting to, I'm not doing something for you because I want to empower you because you've got what you need. I'm just helping you make that real and like obvious.
I love that. I think that's such a great idea. It's so good. You know, there's so much stuff in this coaching micro credential. I don't know if there's anything else, Kim or Dianna or Chrissy or Lissa, that you want to talk about. You know, Chrissy and Lissa are the mentors for the Connected Classroom micro credential, and then Kim and Dianna are the mentors for the coaching micro-credential. And then myself and Heather, who couldn't be here tonight, will be the mentors for the one-to-one micro-credential. Anybody want to add anything else before we move on to, all right, Lissa?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, something that was actually really transformational for our institution, because I started as like a tech coach, and then we're trying to move just into the ethos of instructional coaching. So my job title has actually changed in my 6 years here. And something we did, I think it was 2 years ago now, I think. Oh my goodness. Our entire leadership team, not just the instructional coaches, but also our head of departments, and just that like Jeff, you were talking about, not the admin level, but that kind of weird leadership level. We as a cohort all took the Aduro Learning, just the coaching class from theory into practice. And we all took that together. And that really jump-started for us giving us knowledge, and, you know, like from that theory into practice. And at the end, after the course, we were able to come together as a leadership team and figure out, what does it look like at our school, and do some of that action planning and that long-term, you know, goal setting, and having that experience together, and then being able to be in a cohort and put that into practice instead of just one person who's taken this course. And now what do I do? It was super powerful to take it together with our entire leadership team.
I think that's a great point. You know, one of the things we make sure we do with all our micro credentials and our online courses is that kind of idea of a cohort. Does anybody else want to talk about that, about the power of the cohort, and why we here at Aduro Learning believe so passionately about that, especially when it comes to online learning?
I know for me, like I've done some courses where I was the only one at my school doing it. And so the cohort gave me that community, that just like we talked about, like with the PLN, it gave me that community of people I'm still connected with, that I could get feedback from or get ideas from as well. And it goes beyond, I also, like Lissa, did Coattail, and that just blew open a whole world for me, that of people I'm still connected with today who really influence and support me. So the cohort model is, I love it because whether I'm facilitating it or I'm participating in it, you're sharing and you're supporting each other. And it goes beyond the course. When the course ends, those connections don't end.
I love that.
And I think for me, we talk a lot about this with our parents, that it's all about the conversation, but it's also that with our teachers, because it is all about the conversation. Yes, we are providing you with some really awesome and amazing material, and we're really helping to push you gently forward in whichever direction you want to go. But those conversations that you can have with people that you may not normally connect with is what really, truly makes the learning powerful in a cohort model.
I like that.
Yeah, I was going to say that same kind of thing. It's like, it's that kickstart to getting that kind of understanding of what a personal learning network can be, because especially if you're coming to one of these micro credentials without having a PLN right now, the idea might feel really abstract and like not concrete for you. So having a cohort model and building in that connection as part of the program, so you know what it's like to be connected and learning with and from other educators around the world, helps you see the validity, the purpose, the value behind building that personal learning network. So it's like that kickstart, that jumpstart, that cheat step to get you to your PLN without having to put in as much effort as it might take just on your own.
That's so cool. I love that idea. And, you know, Lissa brought up a really good point along with everything that you were all saying, is this idea of the support from administration. And Lissa talked about, you know, this whole like mid-level administrators, or even like pseudo administrators. I don't know, like Lissa, you did it well, you know, like that level that nobody knows what they do level administrators, you know, and you're not really administrator, but you've got the power and it's kind of this weird place. But the idea of administration and the support that you get from administrators, and when you think about, you know, some of the work that we do with administrative teams and helping, even in a coaching role, helping your administrative be innovative. What are some of the expectations that you see, or some of the things that you help administrators to become more innovative? What are some steps that even as administrator, or somebody who's looking, you know, to get into that coaching role, or even up the playing field into a maybe an administrative role? What are some of the things that you see that are crucial to becoming like an innovative administrator? And I'll go ahead and start while I give you a second. I think for me, the number one thing is all about mindset. How do you support your teachers in allowing them to try things on that might seem crazy at first? And I always talk about, when I'm talking with administrators, I'm like, you need your scouts. You know, you need to have scouts. If we talk about like back in the days of riding horses and, you know, and the Wild West, you needed those people that needed to go out and tell you what was coming, what was over the ridge, where are people at, where is the water supply, where is our food supply. You need people to go out and bring that information back. And I think as administrators, you really need to think about who those people are in your school and really foster and support them in going out, being scouts, for lack of a better word, and bringing back what's working, what's not working, so that we can move the entire system forward. And so for me, that's something that I always try to help administrators understand and play a supporting role in. Does anybody else want to take on that? What is something that you think administrators who would like to go first?
I think it kind of goes along. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. It's like, we want the teachers to be connected. We want our students to be connected. I think helping administrators get connected as well.
Yeah.
Just through Twitter or through, you know, and to model that as well. I think if it's just in general, just showing the teachers and the students and the parents that you're connected, that you're involved with this as well, and keeping up on things. And I, you know, as a technology coach, I can provide information. I can provide, you can ask questions, so I can help you to have a better understanding of what is happening in the school, and what they can do to be connected and be involved as well.
Very cool.
I was going to say almost exactly the same thing, that idea of being a role model for your teachers. But as you were talking, it brought me to another thought, and that is valuing the risks that teachers take and valuing the time and energy that they're putting into it. And I think a lot of times we get into a situation where leadership will say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, but then maybe the energy and effort that they themselves put into X, Y, and Z is not visible to the staff. So making that energy and effort visible to the staff. And what I'm really thinking about is, I was recently doing some professional development at a school, and the deputy head of school was in every single training session that I ran. And like, just him physically being there, not only was he there, but he was engaged in every conversation and knew what was going on at every grade level and every subject area. But just being involved and valuing the time that teachers were spending to grow professionally. I mean, you don't have to do anything else but physically be there, and that's sending a huge message.
Very cool. Awesome. Anyone else want to chime in?
That's what I was going to say. But I think just being open. Sorry, Liz.
No, go.
I think it's just that willingness, and that it comes back to what you said in the first place, Jeff. It's that mindset, like just being open to the fact that teachers want to try something. And yes, you need to ask probing questions to kind of get it, like, what is the purpose for this and what impact is there going to be on student learning? And I think if your teachers can articulate what the purpose is, what the reason is for doing this, and what impact it's going to have on their students' learning, then you should throw up your arms and go for it. I'm here to support you. I have no idea what you're doing, but I'm here for you.
I love that. Love that. Lissa?
When Dianna was talking, what I was thinking was the beauty of having like a personal learning network is that there are networks for every single tiny little niche.
Yeah.
Whether that is a one-to-one teacher, whether that's Mandarin or whatever, it doesn't matter, like an administrator in an international school for whatever size you want, or there is that niche, and you can just have to find it. Sometimes it's harder than others, but when you find it, then it just like opens up that entire world for you.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really good way to put it. We're coming up on about 45 minutes here, and we have about 15 minutes left. And just to recap again, we're kind of going through our micro-credentials here at Eduro Learning and some of the ways that we support teachers and some of the things that you can expect to learn when you take a micro-credential. So again, we started off with talking about the Connected Classroom micro-credential, and that is being ran by Chrissy and Lissa. The one-to-one teacher or the one-to-one educator, which is being facilitated and mentored by myself and Heather Dowd, who couldn't be here with us today. And then the coach, and what does it mean to be that coaching role that's being facilitated and mentored by Kim and Dianna. And as we start thinking about closing, this idea of a micro-credential is quite new in education. The idea of how do we change professional development, especially in a system as large and as entrenched as the educational system is as a whole. And so the first thing I think is trying to wrap your head around about like, what is a micro-credential? How do you define it? And what makes a good one to you? So who would like to try and define in your own words and almost like tweet 140 character-ish, I'll give you a little more than 140 characters, of like when somebody says, oh, I'm taking a micro-credential, or, I'm thinking about a micro-credential, to you, what is it that like comes to your mind? What's like your elevator pitch? Anybody got?
Something I'm passionate about and want to learn more of.
Ooh, I like that.
I think it's a focused series of courses that allows me to take the next step in my own professional learning journey.
Very cool. I like that. So and I think for me, the big one is like, it's a set of courses that lead to some type of recognition, right? Like at the end of it, you're going to get a badge. It's more than just a single course. It's something you can put on a resume. It's something that you can be proud of that you've completed. Why here at Eduro Learning are we running these micro-credentials? Why are we, and I think even more than that, why are all of us, because we're all somehow involved in these micro-credentials, so passionate to give our time to educators who want this like long-term? I mean, our micro-credentials are somewhere around 20 weeks, 22, 25 weeks of learning. And when you take a micro-credential at the premium or academic, is it premium and academic levels?
Yep. Yes.
You actually get one of us sitting here in this talk today to be your mentor. Like I keep saying, you get a mentor in your back pocket. And I want to know, why are you willing to give up your time over 25 weeks to support other educators? Are you people crazy, or is this just what? Yeah. Why, Lissa? Why? It shows your screen, so you must have laughed at something. Why are you willing to do this?
Yeah. I think, like, for me, the original micro-credential, even though it was never called that at the time, was Coattail.
Yeah.
And it was such a powerful learning experience for me that, and all of the ways that we've just been talking, that I then now want to be able to be on that journey as other people have it. So like, I want to experience that over and over and over again. And so I can be a mentor, then I'm like on that journey with you. And I can like hear about your highs and your lows, and I'm really excited for like that whole up and down journey.
Cool.
And
I feel
this
like
has come
very
up-
similar to, again,
Go ahead, Kim.
I feel very similar to Lissa in that I saw the power of Coattail and the power of being connected for myself, that it literally changed my life, like from one place to another place. And so I want to be there for people who want to do that too. And I think that is like so exciting and so empowering and gives me so much inspiration and energy to go through the day, to like see how those maybe small steps can lead to a massive, exciting, empowering change. I want to be part of that.
I love that. How about you, Dianna?
Like Lissa, and all of us have been involved in Coattail, and it was a professional and even personal shift in my the way I think and the way that I approach my job and the way that I work with people. And then I've also been involved with the Enduro coaching course, facilitating the one that Kim developed. I was a participant in the first one, and then now I'm facilitating myself. And I just it's those are the things I know how much it's helped me. And then also facilitating, I've seen how it's helped other coaches as well. And just a side note, you don't have to be a coach like in your title to do something like this. Anyone in any kind of leadership or working with colleagues, but just I wish I had all this. We were talking about this now the expanded micro-credential with the whole package. I think is powerful, and it's something that I'm really excited to be involved in. Also personally, just the things that I'm going to learn and grow from as well. But the supporting teachers who want to make changes in their practice it's very powerful and very empowering as well.
I love that. How about you, Chrissy?
Oh, I had something brilliant to say, and I'm just sitting here listening to Dianna and going, oh, Dianna, I want to be in your micro-credential. I want you to be my mentor. I think now I remember what it was. For me, I remember having to go to professional development that really wasn't for me. It didn't meet my learning style. It really wasn't relevant or timely for me. And I think the thing that we've really been able to do with these particular micro-credentials, and the many more that we hope to put together for people, is that they are relevant, they are timely, they are packaged in a way that you can truly go deeper into a topic that you just don't get when you attend a conference or you attend a one-day training. And so that's what really excites me, and everything else that everyone said.
Very cool. I think for me, the one thing that I think about is being a full-time consultant. I don't have kids in front of me every day. I don't have this ability to, and as you guys know, as a consultant, you come in, you do your thing, you leave, and you don't always get to see the growth afterwards. And one of the things I loved about being a classroom teacher is being able to grab that group of kids, at the beginning of the year and literally go on the journey with them, and be able to, like you said, be there for the highs and lows and to see the change and to support them throughout that. And I think for me personally, I still crave that in some way that I don't get. You fly into a conference, you fly out, you go to a school for one PD day and you never go back. And so for me, I'm excited to just have that again, to have, 20 weeks with an educator, learning with them. And I think for all of us, we kind of touched on it, and I'll probably just say it's a little selfish. We learn a lot on being a mentor. Dianna, you kind of mentioned that too. Being on this side of things, I learn just as much on this side of things as I do in the professional development itself. So I think it's an honor to be able to go through that journey with people and learn beside them. And also a ton of learning for us ourselves as well. I think it's also worth noting that our micro-credentials are tied to continuing education credits. So all of our, depending on which micro-credential you take, you can get different sets of micro-credential or different sets of continuing education units. All that information is on the website. We work with Heritage Institute, who is backed by Antioch University. So know that most of the courses, if they aren't already, will soon actually be approved. The syllabuses are approved by a university. And so that's one thing I think that really makes ours different, is not every micro-credential has the rigor backing of a university behind it. And we've kind of broken them up into 4 different levels that cost four different costs. And you can get that information on our website. But Chrissy, as being kind of like, you're the director of online learning here at Edura Learning, can you kind of explain those 4 levels? Because I think of everybody here, you probably know them the best.
Inside out, back to front, and sideways.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can you kind of explain, like, what are those 4 levels? What can you expect at each level?
Okay, so you can start out with the honor level, and that is basically you're going through the course self-paced at your own time. Even though we've been talking about the courses lasting anywhere between 22 weeks and 26 weeks, you actually, when you sign up, you have access to that course material for a year. So you can go through it at your own pace. You can do the courses in any order. You can choose to do the action tasks or not do the action tasks, read the readings, read the videos. It's entirely up to you. So you basically are getting access to the material, and you have me as a course caretaker to kind of help you with any issues that you may have accessing the material, or so on and so forth. So that's the honor level. And then the next level above that is the certificate level. And so same thing, you're going through the course at your own pace, taking them in whatever order. That's the same as the honor package. But with the certificate package, you actually will receive a certificate at the end that proves that you have taken this course, and you can use that on your CV. You can provide it to your employer. You can't get any clock hours or credit for that, because again, you're stuck with me being your course caretaker. And so I'm just there to support you technically through the course. But you do receive a certificate if you click, I've completed that, I've completed that. So there are our 2 layers at the bottom. And then our next layer above that is our academy package, which we have the wonderful Dianna as a mentor, and the awesome Lissa as a mentor, and the extraordinary Heather, whom you've yet to meet. She is also a mentor at the academy level. Now, those cohorts are limited to 15 participants only. So that is it. Once we hit those numbers, that's closed, and you will have to wait a whole year before you can get access to these awesome people. So they are your mentors in your back pocket. You can find out all about what the mentors can do for you on our micro-credentials page. Each of the micro-credentials have their own page with all the in-depth information about what the learning outcomes are, what the credits are, and what your mentor can do for you. And so that is the academy package. And then our very top line package is the premium package. And in the premium package, you get access to myself, the amazing Kim Cafino, and the equally extraordinary Jeff Udick. We only have that cohort at a limit of 5. So once we hit our 5 participants, that is it. That is closed, and you can't get in for another year. And this really is same thing as every other package. You go through the courses, but you have us there literally virtually holding your hand and supporting you just like we could if we were there with you face to face. And that's why we've really limited those numbers to just 5, so that we can literally be there. So you have access to us for up to 26 weeks, which is basically a whole school year. So that's the packages. As I said, all those details are on our website under our micro-credentials. So if this interests you, go and take a look.
And now you all know why I asked Chrissy to explain to you the 4 different packages. I'm obviously in the wrong part of the house because it's gotten really dark.
It has.
And Chrissy still has a lot of light around her, so I have to figure out what I'm doing wrong at this part of the house. Even though she's right underneath me. It's pretty crazy. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate all of you taking the time. Lissa and Dianna getting up at 4 a.m.
Yeah, you guys are rock stars.
I can't thank you enough. Kim is just starting her day in Bangkok. Thank you, Kim, for being here. And Chrissy, we did 8 hours of consulting together and another hour online. So thank you, everybody, for showing up. I hope this webinar was helpful for everyone and really excited. Please visit edurolearning.com for more information. You can find our micro-credential information there with everything that Chrissy just explained to you. And we really hope to see you in a micro-credential soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.